Hello and welcome. I'm your host, GM Spot of the Galactic Matador. This is episode 4. It's really torture. Today we're going to spotlight the torture rack from the HeroQuest re-edition from HasLabs. I've already spray painted it with a Vallejo black primer with my airbrush. And now we're going to apply a dry brush, a white, over the entire piece, highlighting the most raised areas and really giving a white to the areas that I want the transparent paint to really come out. So here I started with the chain first and the pulley. Next moved on to the stone bed, highlighting the cuffs and chains. Making sure that the white was very opaque there, on the edges as well. I would envision that, the people that get tortured on this rack probably have to slide off and on a lot. Next, hit up the sides where the rock texture is. Good to go both directions here. You're not looking to present too much shadow. You're looking to get the flat pieces of the stone covered and leaving the deep recesses black. Sometimes it can be very cathartic to dry brush. It's very fun. You can see I'm really applying a dry brush to these raised areas on the bed and to the pulleys and the handles. And I want to make sure too that the center of the pulley is really well transitioned from light to dark. There it is, it's all dry brushed. Just taking out a couple of extra spots where I want the highlights to be. Alright, I'll finish up with the dry brush. You can see, highlights very well. You can get a really good texture. Next, we'll move on to the brown wood of the torture device. I've mixed up a DIY version of contrast paint, using a brown here to get into those recesses of the handles and the pieces that attach to the base of the bed. We're also going to do the spindle of the torture chamber racky thing. Don't be afraid to paint over some details, because you're going to come back and clean those up, right? So on the handles of the torture spindle are hand caps. Later on we'll paint those up silver. Alright, now we're going to get into the spindle. Don't be afraid to get some paint on the chains. It's okay. You want to really get a good amount of paint in there, especially this contrast paint. It needs a good amount to not only leave a good color, but to really get down in those recesses and pool and create some additional shadows. Next up, we're going to do red. This is a transparent red from Monument Hobbies. We're going to paint the tattered sheets red. And because we did the dry brush with the white to give it that zenithal highlight, the transparency really comes out and highlights those different shades of red with the white. Got to be very careful here. Lots of edges and crevasses in those rocks that can wick away paint and get them, kind of bleed into those crevices. And if that happens, it's very difficult to come back from. Take your time. Patience. The devil is in the details. And there you can see it. Feel like one of the details I missed was applying some blood. But we're going to apply silver along the edges and on the spindle there, where the cuffs are and the chain. But first, maybe a tiny bit of blood right there on the bed. You know, I'm thinking the person who was last tortured here, whose arm is actually still attached to a cuff, probably was a little bloody when it came off. All right, here we go. Vallejo dark aluminum. We've lightly thinned it with some water. And if my finger wasn't in the way, you'd probably see it better. It's the bad part about streaming live. Sometimes you do it great, sometimes you mess up. Here you can see we're doing the band around the tabletop. Again, take your time. Remember that the band is 3D, so it has a top and a bottom, not just a side. Remember that if that paint does get into the rock, into those crevices, it'll be difficult to clean up afterwards, and to touch up, you'll have to come back with a dark wash. See, we're almost finished here with the band. Now we'll do the little shackles for the legs. May go back, paint a little blood on those shackles, you know, because I'm sure it hurt. Next we'll get the chains and the cuffs. Don't forget the inside of the cuffs and the outside of the cuffs are modeled, so got to get both sides. With metallic paints, they can be, especially if you water them down a little bit, not only to make them easier to paint with, but always remember to kind of wick away that excess paint a little bit. Otherwise, it will flow into all the places you don't want it to go. Now we're painting the chains on the spindle. You can see my huge fat hand in the way. All right, next up, getting that band around the spindle, and then we're going to start painting the caps on the handles. So touching up the caps on the handles, painting those in silver, really makes them pop. Didn't realize that when I started this there would be 8 of these to do, so it took some time. One of the longer pieces of the actual torture device was just painting these caps. Still going at it. Still painting those caps. We're almost to the end though. Here's where I begin to kind of touch up the silver nuts and screws and bolts that are on the that are holding the device together. A little bit of touch here makes it go a long way. Always double check your work. Make sure you get all the pieces. That's the important part. The devil is in the details. Next, we'll apply a wash. You can see that my wash is really watered down to a milky-like consistency. It's almost transparent. I actually used a black Monument Paints transparent black on this, so it was really easy to thin down, yet it keeps a lot of its pigment and its color. So it really got down in those crevices, really brought out the contrast and detail, especially in the wood and the rock top surface of the table. Make sure that when you do a wash, you do it with the camera facing you. So here I'm touching up the very top. Now we'll clean up the wash. We'll hit it with a couple of highlights here and there, probably. Yep. That's after the wash is finished. You can see the details pretty good. The final step, of course, is hitting those highlights. I just added a few here and there across the tops of the handles and the spindle and on the fabric. You can see here that it came out really nice. So thanks for watching. As always, like and subscribe. Doing an entire series, Project HeroQuest. I'm GM Spada.